My best friend of 6 years just revealed to me he's an undercover FBI agent. I don't even know where to begin. My hands are shaking as I type this. My entire world has been turned upside down in the span of a few hours, and I'm still trying to process what the hell just happened. I've always been a lurker on Reddit, but I need to get this off my chest, and I don't know who else to turn to. For context, I'm a 28-year-old guy, and my best friend Jake, not his real name, is 29. We met in college 6 years ago and have been inseparable ever since. We bonded over late-night study sessions, a shared love for obscure indie bands, and an unhealthy addiction to energy drinks during finals week. After graduation, we both landed jobs in the same city and even became roommates. It was like the universe wanted us to stick together. Jake was the kind of friend everyone wished they had, always there when you needed him, quick with a joke to lighten the mood, and generous to a fault. He was the guy who'd drop everything to help you move, who'd remember your mom's birthday and remind you to call her, who'd stay up all night to help you prepare for a big presentation at work. He was my brother in every way except blood. Or so I thought. Last night, everything I thought I knew about Jake turned out to be a lie. It started innocently enough. We had plans to meet at our favorite bar after work, a little dive called the Rusty Nail that we'd been frequenting since we moved to the city. I was running late, thanks to a last-minute request from my boss, so I texted Jake to let him know I'd meet him there. When I arrived, the place was packed, typical for a Friday night. The air was thick with the smell of beer and the sound of laughter. But as I scanned the familiar faces, Jake was nowhere to be seen. I found a spot at the bar and ordered a beer, figuring he was just late too. Jake was usually annoyingly punctual, but hey, maybe he got held up at work too. No big deal, right? After waiting for about half an hour, constantly checking my phone and the door, I finally got a text from Jake. Emergency at work. Rain check? Now, Jake works, or I thought he worked, as a data analyst for a marketing firm. What kind of emergency could he possibly have on a Friday night? Something felt off. Maybe it was intuition, or maybe it was the 2 beers I'd had while waiting, but I decided to swing by our apartment to check on him. As I approached our building, a nondescript brownstone in a quiet neighborhood, I noticed a black SUV parked across the street. 2 men in suits sat inside, their eyes fixed on our apartment. A chill ran down my spine. Something was definitely wrong. This wasn't the kind of neighborhood where people in suits hung out in SUVs on a Friday night. I took the stairs to our 3rd-floor apartment, my heart pounding with each step. When I reached our door, I paused. Voices were coming from inside, stern, unfamiliar voices that didn't belong to any of our friends. "Agent Taylor, we need you on this case. You're the only one with the necessary background and skills." Agent Taylor? My mind raced. Who the hell was Agent Taylor? Then I heard Jake's voice, low and serious in a way I'd never heard before. "I understand, sir. But I've been under deep cover for years. If I suddenly disappear, it could raise suspicions." I stumbled back, my mind reeling. Jake? An undercover agent? It couldn't be true. This had to be some kind of prank, right? Maybe he was rehearsing for an audition or something. Jake had always talked about trying out community theater. But as I stood there, frozen in disbelief, fragments of memories began to fit together like a jigsaw puzzle I never knew I was solving. The missed calls that he'd explain away with a shrug and a smile. The long weekends where he'd disappear, citing family obligations or impromptu road trips. The way he always seemed to know more than he let on about current events and politics, despite claiming to be just a data guy. I must have made a noise, a gasp, a stumble, I'm not sure, because suddenly, the voices inside went silent. Panic seized me. I ran, taking the stairs 2 at a time, my feet barely touching the ground. I burst out of the building, gasping for air, my mind a whirlwind of confusion and disbelief. As I stood on the sidewalk, trying to catch my breath, the black SUV across the street started its engine. I looked up to see the 2 men in suits staring at me intently. One of them spoke into a radio, his eyes never leaving me. I ran again. I don't remember much of that run. It's all a blur of streetlights and pounding feet and the rush of blood in my ears. I ended up in a 24-hour diner on the outskirts of town, the kind of place where the coffee is always burnt and the waitresses call you Han no matter how old you are. As I nursed a cup of that terrible coffee, my phone exploded with activity. Calls and texts from Jake, one after another. I couldn't bring myself to answer. What would I even say? "Hey man, funny story, I just found out you're a secret agent. Want to grab a beer and talk about it?" The latest text read, "We need to talk. It's not what you think. Please, let me explain." Not what I think? What else could it possibly be? I sat in that diner for hours, watching the sun rise through the grimy windows, turning Jake's words over and over in my mind. The Jake I knew, the guy who could spend hours debating the merits of obscure bands, who always remembered my birthday, who had been there for me through breakups and job losses. Was he real? Or was he just a carefully crafted persona, designed to fool everyone around him? After what felt like an eternity, after the waitress had refilled my coffee cup more times than I could count, I made a decision. I texted Jake back, "Diner on 5th and Oak. Come alone." When Jake walked in 20 minutes later, he looked nothing like the carefree friend I thought I knew. His face was drawn, his eyes constantly scanning the diner, pausing on each patron before finally settling on me. He slid into the booth across from me, his hands clasped tightly on the table. "I'm sorry," he said simply. I stared at him, this stranger wearing my best friend's face. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Jake, or whoever he was, took a deep breath. "My name is Jacob Taylor. I'm a special agent with the FBI's Counterintelligence Division. I've been undercover for the past 6 years, investigating a potential domestic terrorism threat." The words hung in the air between us, heavy and surreal. I wanted to laugh, to tell him to cut the crap and admit it was all an elaborate prank. But the look in his eyes told me everything I needed to know. This was real. 6 years, I repeated, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. Our entire friendship. It was all a lie? Jake, Agent Taylor, flinched as if I'd struck him. "No," he said firmly, leaning forward. "Our friendship wasn't part of my cover. It wasn't planned. You weren't a target or a person of interest. You were just you. My friend." I scoffed. "A friend you've been lying to since the day we met." "I didn't have a choice," he said, his voice tinged with frustration. "The work I do. It's important. Lives are at stake. I couldn't risk compromising the operation." "So why tell me now?" I asked, anger and hurt bubbling up inside me. "Why not just disappear, move on to your next assignment, your next fake life?" Jake leaned forward, his eyes intense. "Because you're my best friend. Because the thought of disappearing from your life without explanation. I couldn't do it. You deserve the truth, even if it means risking my career." I sat back, trying to process everything. The Jake I knew, was he real? Or was he just a carefully crafted persona? "Tell me something true," I said suddenly. "Something real about you that isn't part of your cover." Jake didn't hesitate. "I really do love those weird indie bands. My taste in music wasn't part of my cover. Neither was my addiction to terrible sci-fi movies or my inability to cook anything more complicated than pasta." He paused, a small smile playing at his lips. "And I really did fail that econ final in sophomore year. That wasn't part of my cover, I just suck at economics." Despite myself, I felt a laugh bubble up. It was such a Jake thing to say, so familiar and real amidst all the lies and deception. "Why did you become an FBI agent?" I asked, curious despite my lingering anger. Jake's face grew serious. "My sister," he said softly. "She was killed in a terrorist attack when I was in high school. I wanted to do something, anything, to prevent other families from experiencing that kind of loss." The raw pain in his voice was unmistakable. For the first time since discovering the truth, I felt a flicker of understanding. "The case you're working on," I said slowly, "is it dangerous?" Jake nodded. "Very. That's why I've been so careful all these years. The group we're investigating. They wouldn't hesitate to use anyone close to me as leverage." A chill ran down my spine as the full implications of his words sank in. "Am I in danger?" I asked. "Not if I can help it," Jake said firmly. "That's why I'm here. I need to disappear for a while, go deep undercover. But first, I needed you to know the truth. And I needed to make sure you'll be safe." I stared at him, this man who was both my best friend and a complete stranger. "What happens now?" Jake reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, unmarked envelope. "In here, you'll find contact information for a handler. If you ever feel that you're in danger, or if you need to reach me in an emergency, use it. But only in an absolute emergency. Your safety depends on maintaining the illusion that you know nothing." I took the envelope with trembling hands. "And you? Where will you go?" "I can't tell you that," Jake said, regret clear in his voice. "It's safer for both of us if you don't know. But I promise you, when this is all over, I'll come back. And if you're willing, I'll tell you everything." We sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of unasked questions and unspoken goodbyes hanging between us. Finally, Jake stood. "I have to go," he said softly. "Take care of yourself." As he turned to leave, I found my voice. "Jake," I called out. He paused, looking back at me. "Be careful." A smile, sad but genuine, crossed his face. "Always am," he said. And then he was gone, the bell above the door chiming his departure. I sat in the diner for a long time after he left, turning the envelope over in my hands. Part of me wanted to tear it open, to read every detail it contained. But a larger part knew that ignorance, in this case, really was bliss. As I finally stood to leave, I realized that despite everything, despite the lies and the secrets, one thing remained true: Jake was still my best friend. And somehow, someway, I knew we'd find our way back to that friendship. But for now, all I could do was wait, hope, and trust that the friend I thought I knew was still in there somewhere, fighting the good fight. I don't really know why I'm posting this. Maybe I just needed to get it off my chest. Maybe I'm hoping someone out there has been through something similar and can offer advice. Or maybe I just need someone to tell me I'm not crazy, that this really happened. Whatever the case, my life will never be the same. And somewhere out there, my best friend is risking his life to keep us all safe. If you've read this far, thanks for listening to my story. And Jake, if by some miracle you read this, stay safe, man. Edit, holy crap, this blew up overnight. Thanks for all the supportive comments and messages. To address a few common questions. 1. Yes, I've considered that Jake might be lying or delusional. But the men in the SUV and the conversation I overheard make me believe he's telling the truth. Plus, if this was a lie or a delusion, it's an incredibly elaborate one. 2. No, I haven't told anyone else about this. Jake made it clear that my safety depends on maintaining the illusion that I know nothing. As much as I want to confide in someone, I can't risk putting Jake or myself in danger. 3. I'm not going to try to investigate or get involved. I know that would only put Jake and myself in danger. I'm trying to go about my life as normally as possible, even though it feels like I'm living in a spy thriller. 4. To those saying this is fake, I wish it was. My life would be a lot simpler if it was. But I understand the skepticism. If I hadn't lived through it, I wouldn't believe it either. 5. A lot of you have asked how I'm coping. Honestly? Not great. I keep second-guessing every memory I have with Jake, wondering what was real and what was part of his cover. It's messing with my head. I'm considering seeing a therapist, but I don't know how much I can say without putting Jake at risk. 6. For those asking about the envelope, no, I haven't opened it. It's hidden away in a safe place. Just knowing it's there is both comforting and terrifying. I'll update if anything significant happens, but for now, I'm trying to get back to some semblance of normal life. Thanks again for the support, Reddit. It means more than you know.